Welcome to Baringa's webinar on digital change in trading organisations. My name is Andy Singleton. I'm a partner in Baringa's generation and trading practice, and I'll be hosting today's session. Delighted to have with me today Jenny Jackson, who is the program lead for the Lead in Data program of digital change and data-driven change at RWE Supply and Trading, and also Shamal Shah, a director in Baringa's data analytics practice, who's been working in the energy sector for a number of years now. Quick bit of housekeeping before we begin, as I think Matt's already posted in the chat window. A few ground rules. This session is being recorded and the link will be shared with attendees post the call. We're going to monitor the waiting room as we go through the session, admit any attendees in case of any late joiners or technical issues, people getting booted out. And that also includes us presenters. If we get booted out, please bear with us as we seek to resolve any technical issues. We are planning to mute participants. You may have noticed you've been muted as we go through the session. There are quite a lot of people that have registered for this, so in the interest of fairness, what we're looking to do is use the chat window. Please post questions within that, and we will try and push through the core of the presentation in about 40-45 minutes and leave 15 minutes for discussion at the end. Matt Hayward on our side will be looking at and triaging a number of the questions within there, and he will pose those to Sham, Jenny and myself at the end of the session. If we don't get through all the questions, apologies in advance. We will reach out to each of you individually that have asked questions if we haven't been able to answer them post the session to try and come back to you all. So without further ado, let's move on to the agenda and the content for today. I'll spend about 10 to 15 minutes at the start providing a little bit of context around how we see organisations approaching digital-driven change, how they want to consider their investment prioritisation, and the way we think about organisations in this space at the moment. Sham will dive into what we're terming the pillars of success, what good looks like in terms of data-driven change, and some considerations for delivery. And then Jenny's going to lead us through the RWE Supply and Trading Lead in Data case study, as they've been on their journey over the last 10 months or so and have had some great results. At the end, as I mentioned, we'll finish off with a Q&A. That will be done through the chat window. Please post your questions in there and we'll aim to close slightly before 1 o'clock so you can all get off to your next video conference. So let's start at the beginning. Where do I prioritise my investment? Where do I spend my money? How do I prioritise it? Where to focus? Ultimately, how do I retain and grow a competitive edge in this fast-changing market? Most importantly, though, how do I link what I'm doing to ensure it's aligned to my strategy? So let's take a step back for a second and just have a look at what's happening in the market more widely. A few little snippets out there, all publicly available information, but it does give you a bit of insight into some of the change and rapid change that's happened over the last few years. Three major themes that we see through here, one of which, mergers and acquisitions. A number of organisations out there are creating unique offerings and they're subsequently being bought or merged into other organisations, so those other organisations can further accelerate their digital transformation. Other organisations are trying to develop internal capabilities to develop their own internal digital offerings. And the third theme that we're seeing is data-driven insight. So organisations that are looking to use and leverage data to make better decisions, to either save money or to make more money more effectively. So if that's the market context, what are we seeing happening within those organisations to enable them to change? Bit of a busy slide this one, but if you bear with us, there are three core drivers of digital change that we see. On the left-hand side, you've got core digitization. So that's doing things faster, more efficiently. A lot of these tools and technologies have been around for 5+ years now, and many organizations are really getting to grips with and implementing a large level of automation in there. So automation of core processes and principles, but also automation of other activities as well. Position management tooling is one example of something that's taken a real shift in the last couple of years. So that's doing things faster and more efficiently. The middle lens is looking at creating new offerings. So this is doing something different. This is creating new opportunities and new revenue streams through new tooling. Often this is customer orientated, so it can be anything from customer portals to pricing services to flexibility provision. And as you saw on the last slide, a number of the new entrants, small new entrants, are in this space. They come up with really insightful and innovative products in the market and are subsequently then bought as an organization to accelerate another organization's digital change agenda. On the right-hand side, we've got data-driven insight. So that's increasing revenue or reducing costs through better insight. Using data as an asset, leveraging that data, whether it be in AI demand forecasting, imbalance price forecasting, segmentation of customers, or 1,000 other different use cases out there, organizations trying to get a hold of and manage their data better and more effectively so that they can make more money or reduce their costs through that. And that area on the right-hand side is where we're going to spend a large chunk of today. A lot of organizations are trying to do a combination of all of the above, but as we'll come on to talk about, it's really the priority order in which you place upon each of these items that's key. It's that needs to align to your strategy. So a lot of what I've talked about so far sounds pretty simple. Unfortunately, getting transformation right, especially in the right-hand box, is pretty hard. And as Sham and Jenny will talk through in a minute, most organizations go through a level of learning and development as they go through these journeys. The really hard part, though, is getting it right in a sustainable way that then in 5 years' time, that further then grows your capability for the long term. So of the above areas, where are you going to invest? What's your primary focus? Well, to look at this, we'll look at what an organization looks like. Where is an organization focused? The old way of thinking looked at, well, is an organization more focused on fossil fuels? Is it on renewables and clean tech on one axis? On another axis, is it a trading organization? Is it a trading and retail organization? Is it a trading asset and retail organization? You used to plot organizations against those dimensions and then look at moving those organizations or companies around that matrix. So, for example, on the screen, we've got Party F there. Strategic intent to shift its increased focus on renewables. However, that old way of thinking and classifying organizations doesn't actually help you if you're looking to focus your investment. Moving to renewables, does that mean you focus more on RPA automation, or does it mean doubling down on creating a great data analytics playground? So instead, we've come up with a different way of looking at your business. The two axes here, commercial scale, so on the left-hand side, small organizations at the bottom and large multi-asset, multi-market organizations at the top. And on the bottom axis, what we're terming functional autonomy. What do I mean by that? Well, on the left-hand side, you've got an organization that's much more centralized. So hierarchical desks, centralized functions, a drive for zero duplication and a focus on scale. On the right-hand side, you've got much more of a franchise type organization where you've got delegated authorities, delegated P&L accountability, self-reflective funding, real value pool focus in those different P&L groups. Potentially some duplication of functions, but predominantly you've got an ability to adapt and rapidly change based on data and insight. So what does this mean in terms of the different types of organization out there? 3 different groups that we've got. Cost optimizer. So scale businesses, those businesses are going to win through the lowest cost provision, lowest cost of risk capital. If you look outside the energy sector, a really good example of that is someone like Amazon. They have the ultimate drive to reduce the value chain costs. On the energy trading side, an organization like that would have the lowest cost to operate. It's about having the low OPEX and lowest risk capital costs so that it can offer product at the lowest possible price to the end customer or consumer. So that is absolutely a valid strategy and way to operate and where you might want to place your business. On the bottom right, you've got digital offering players. So as we talked about earlier, that's much more of a niche, winning through slightly narrower focused digital-led propositions, often end consumer focused propositions as well. And that's where I mentioned earlier that a number of those types of organizations are gaining some real traction and success and then subsequently being bought out as part of a larger organization's ambitions to grow. And in the top right, we've got data-driven traders. So those sorts of organizations are going to win through speed of execution, the ability to adapt, but most importantly, quality and sharing of trusted insight. Outside of the energy sector, you look at a company such as Google. That is an organization that has absolutely focused its core business on having high quality data and sharing that data around the organization. Going forwards in energy trading organizations, the asset isn't just a fundamental asset that generates electricity, extracts gas, or provides customers. It is the underlying data that is supported against those items. You need to invest in data and the management of data to get the most out of it over the long term. So if you look at where those businesses are going to focus, naturally against the 3 different buckets we showed up earlier, the cost optimizer is going to focus on the top left. The data-driven trader is going to focus much more on the AI, data-driven insight, and on the bottom right, you've got the digital offering player that's going to focus much more in the niche markets. This is where we're starting to see a bit of an identity crisis in some organizations. Organizations need to look at business strategy to provide insight and clarity about what their key focus areas should be. Being digital or leveraging data isn't sufficient strategy in order to understand where to invest. Is your organization going to provide the lowest cost to customers? Is it going to provide the most tailored products? Is it going to provide value-add services that mean you can charge a premium? Or will it win through better trading analytical insight? And if so, in what form? That's why linking your digital investment strategy to your business goals is absolutely key. So let's drill into that identity crisis just for a minute or two. We think there are 2 different potentially identity crises out there. Are you top left or are you top right? Why do you need to prioritize? Can't you just be both? Our perspective is that you can try and achieve both items, but you need to have a priority. Is your priority to be a cost optimizer or is your priority to be a data-driven trader? Why is it important you have a priority? Well, the quicker you can differentiate on one of those dimensions, the better. The market is moving fast, and therefore you need to move into one of those spaces as quickly as possible. The second area of identity crisis we think is in the event you've chosen to be a data-driven trader, you decided you're going to get more value out of data. What does that actually mean? Where exactly are you going to gain value? As a business, you'll need to define use cases that align to that. You need to have an agreed understanding of what data within your organization has value. You'll also need to understand how people are going to access, leverage, and ensure that data is valid and trusted. What is it about your business strategy that lets you win? Do you have better customer insight than others? In which case, that's your valuable data. Do you have more real-time wind asset data across Europe? Do you have better quants and traders that can make better insight from marketing data? You need to understand and categorize your data and understand what's real value. So you need to focus your investment while you build a data-driven culture. Why do you need to focus in such a way? Because change needs to be incremental. In this world, you need rapid, pragmatic, data-driven change. So you need to focus in the areas you can win in as quickly as possible. We believe that delivering an incremental program of change that aligns your data strategy to your business strategy will result in value generation. On the converse, if your business or data strategy isn't clearly enough articulated, then investment risks being inefficient and too broad and could leave you behind some of the other players in the market. So over the next 30 minutes or so, Sham and Jenny are going to drill into the challenges and ways of succeeding on the journey to become a truly innovative, data-driven organisation.
Thank you, Andy. So yeah, as Andy said, what I'm going to take you through now is our experience on that transformation, on actually transforming your organisation to become data-driven. So on this next slide, we show a few kind of questions that we've seen in the market. Sorry, Andy, just flip over to the next slide for me. So in this next slide, we effectively see some questions that we typically get asked when we go into organisations. These are all quite specific questions, and we actually think these are the wrong kind of questions to be asking. They're very point questions which don't really lead you to the business value that you're kind of looking for. So some examples here around putting a data lake in place. Typically, kind of, we've seen this as an IT-led strategy to establish a kind of capability, or then a data catalog, which is again typically kind of a capability you put in to really allow users to find data. But actually, you need to think a bit holistically about how you get hold of data and give your users and business access to that data. So this question here, we feel is a more holistic kind of question, and it asks you to look at a number of different kind of capabilities within your organization. We want to look at how we get good quality data into the hands of the business, and also invest in the right skills, the right tools to enable those business users to use the data in their day-to-day operations and make informed decisions. So move on to the next slide. So how do we get there? So we've got identified here 3 pillars of success. So Andy's talked to you about setting that direction, being clear on the strategy that you want to take, and how you're going to achieve that. So the next thing is, how do you then communicate that to your business? That strategy, once you've defined it, everyone in your team, in your organization needs to understand how they are contributing to that strategy. So aligning your organization, communicating your goals, communicating your vision is kind of clear. Once that's been done, and that's obviously an ongoing process, once that's been done and you've got that in place, then it's thinking about what foundations do we need to deliver that strategy. And this for us is all about putting the capabilities that accelerate your delivery and enable your teams to be successful. And that's kind of critical as a foundational capability. And this is where we see a lot of struggle to actually change the ways organizations work on a daily basis. And then once those foundations are in place, it's about incremental delivery, providing value to users on a regular basis and getting feedback. You're not going to get this right first time. So it's how do you get that feedback loop to ensure value is delivered in that incremental process. So I'm going to jump into that middle pillar now. Andy talked to you about the direction, and what I want to think about, what are the right foundations for you? So just to explain this 2x2, what we're showing here are an axis around really. So we're looking here at some really interesting innovation and kind of capabilities that we see within the market and within the data industry as well, in terms of some really exciting technologies that can really help you and accelerate. What we're showing here is actually where we see adoption in the market, and also we're looking at then where do we see value being realized from adoption of those different types of technologies and ways of working. So I'm going to step into a couple of these, and the aim is how do we get adoption of these technologies, but actually use them and leverage them to realize value. And we see some common pitfalls as well. So focusing on cloud, obviously there's huge adoption of the use of cloud. But what we see in the market is a lot of organizations are adopting cloud. However, they're still thinking about how they use cloud in a very traditional way. So for example, moving their ETRM system into the cloud without thinking about how you may re-engineer that. So using SaaS services, so software as a service and platform as a services, to really use the native cloud capability and accelerate your delivery and enable your developers and your kind of IT organization to use all the innovation in the cloud, as opposed to kind of using the cloud as just another kind of data center. That's one critical area for success. Then kind of staying in that box, we see a lot of organizations investing in data governance and actually data science kind of capability. But the data scientists have been put into teams where actually they don't have access to data and they're not embedded within the business. So you don't see the value realization coming from there. And data governance, starting on a data governance journey, we see organization investing in large-scale governance programs to put ownership and stewardship across the organization, but then forgetting the kind of core essence of why we want governance is to make trusted data available to across the organization. So how do you get that governance into place with a just enough mindset, so you put the governance that's actually supporting and delivering value for you? I'm then going to jump onto kind of the bottom right there, the DevOps capability. Now, we see a lot of organizations, and there's quite a lot of high press around how DevOps has helped organizations to implement a faster delivery process. What we're seeing here is DevOps is critical for you to be able to deploy capability to your users quickly, but also in a way that you've built in quality and robust processes to ensure that testing occurs as you do that, so to improve kind of that level of maturity and quality. That capability is hard to implement, and it's quite a different mindset shift to where you are now. And the key here is around automation and upskilling your teams. So it's about not having a ticketing system to kind of get access to resources. It's about how do we kind of put in place the automation so this can be done by code. So that those kind of key kind of foundational capabilities are areas that we've seen deliver value once invested in and actually used kind of correctly. The last one I'm going to touch on is Agile. And Agile is an area that we've seen a lot of adoption, but actually the value we believe is not being realized due to Agile being adopted in a way that doesn't say true to kind of the essence and the need. So on this next slide, what I'm going to take you through are just some key areas that we see that when embarking on the Agile journey, what is the essence of Agile? Why are we implementing Agile, and what do we believe is critical kind of for success of that? So the first thing is we talked about this a few times, but that clearly defined goal. So why are you setting up this new business function? Why are you taking on this new project? Communicating the value to the business is critical. Having that clearly defined and then communicated is so important. And I think a lot of organizations kind of fail at this first hurdle. You've got a high level strategy, but then communicating that and making real for actually what value do we want to kind of deliver is kind of critical. Then taking that and breaking that down into a backlog of epics and features that say, right, to deliver this value, here are all the things that we need to do. And really, this is where you start kind of thinking about how you empower your team, because you want your team really focused on taking that objective and feeling empowered to say, right, I'm going to work out, this team is going to work out what we're going to do to kind of actually achieve that goal. And then getting the team and empowering the team to think about, okay, well, what are the stories? How are we going to, what are the smaller tasks that we need to do to actually achieve that epic? And that gives ownership to the team. And then by putting the capabilities we talked about in the last slide, you're empowering them. You're giving the engineers the ability to use cloud technology, which accelerates them. You haven't got the barriers of kind of a ticketing system that means that it takes them ages to kind of get access to resources. You've got the users kind of embedded within the team, so you've got that dialogue. You've got the data quality and the governance people within that team as well. So at the same time, they're thinking about the kind of quality that they bring. So it's really about how do you empower those teams to deliver that value. But then always having that feedback loop with users. So ensuring that as you deliver and build things, as I said, you're not going to get that right the first time. And making those kind of small adjustments incrementally every 2 weeks, getting user feedback, feeding that back to the team, and actually adjusting your course. And for us, these are the kind of components that we feel are really going to be critical for driving value. So that's all great theory, but what we want to do now is take you through how we have worked with RWE to take that theory and make it a reality.
Thanks, Sham. So if we look at the next slide. So at RWE Supply and Trading, we've been building a leading data capability, which enables our users to have a single place to be able to manipulate and access that trusted data faster and more efficiently. And before we look at this capability in more detail, I think it's good to take a step back and talk about why we initiated this program. And as a company, we believe data and people are our assets and that they are fundamental to retaining our competitive edge. And so we recognise that investment in this area is needed, and this led to the creation of the Leading Data project. So in Q1 last year, we had several kickoff workshops with our users. And the key pain points that came out of those workshops were around finding data, accessing data, sharing data, and trusting data. And it's based on these pain points that we created our vision for the technical platform. And as you can see in the diagram on this slide here, we created a data access layer, which connected to multiple data sources and provided a trusted single source of data for the users. We will do, as a later stage, implement the data catalog. This is a place where users can find the data and understand the quality of the data. We've then implemented a data wrangling tool where users can go explore and analyze that data. And then we've got a consumption layer on top where users can then visualize that data as well. And as you can see, that the program is about building a technical platform, but it doesn't stop there. It's also about creating a data-driven culture and a new way of working with data. It's about creating a new operating model and a new organizational setup with training pathways to be able to upskill our people. And this is necessary to ensure that the platform we built is set up for long-term success. But we all know that delivering is not the hard part. The problem is the journey and how we get there. So I think before I go through this slide, I think some of the mistakes that Sham highlighted on one of his previous slides that a lot of Baringa's clients make, I think we've been there, but actually for us it was about learning from those mistakes and using those mistakes to help shape our approach for how we're going forward now with Leading Data. And in terms of how we went about this, so first of all, it was about setting the direction. So if we look at business driven, so for us, this was really important for the project to be business driven, because Leading Data is more than just about implementing a technical platform. It's also about creating a new way of working with data, changing mindsets and culture. And for this, you need to have senior management support, but you need the cultural change as well to be led from the heart of the business to ensure buy-in and to gain momentum. Next of all, we looked at the communication and strategy. So once we created our vision, we communicated this over and over again. We wanted our organisation to understand what we're doing and how this was going to bring value to our organisation. And for this, we created a data strategy, which showed how Leading Data could support our commercial strategy and how we were going to do this. The next thing then was around procurement. So we got procurement on board from the very early stages of the programme to agree that the approach we were going to take with our vendors. And we as a project wanted to follow an agile approach. But actually, when we first engaged with procurement, they wanted us to follow a traditional paper-based exercise. So they wanted us to submit a request for information and a request for proposal. Whereas actually, we were very clear that getting hands-on with the tools was essential for us, and this is an approach that we were able to convince procurement to follow as well. So once we'd set the direction, then we looked at the foundations. And the first one for the foundations was around identifying the right partners. And there's two parts to this. We as a company were implementing a new capability, and so we recognised that from the start that we needed external expertise to support us on our journey. So this is where we started working with Baringa. The second part then was around finding vendors with the right mindset. We wanted to enter into a partnership together, and we were also had a clear vision on we needed a cost model that suited our needs. So that was a really key part about making sure that we find the right vendors there. And the next one was around access to infrastructure. Now, when we got started on our project last year, we certainly didn't appreciate our dependency on a new cloud infrastructure which was being rolled out within the company in parallel to the Leading Data programme. And it was only once we started to try and deploy the external tools into our environment that we understood the true dependency. And at that time, Leading Data was not one of the pilot projects for this new infrastructure. But actually, what we were able to do through the senior management support that we had was we were enable this Leading Data to become a key priority and to enable us to become one of the pilot projects to be able to get onto the cloud. The next thing was around then building the right team. So building new capabilities meant that we needed the right skills. And so for this, we set out hiring new talent with the right skills and mindset. And this in itself was a challenge. These skills are in very high demand in the market. So, and we were recruiting in a fast moving market. So the next thing then, once we established the foundations, was around looking at how we were going to deliver. And strong business engagement was essential here. So in order for the platform to be a success, we needed the users to be heavily involved from the start. This meant having the users involved in the vendor evaluation phase, and the users played a key role in the evaluation, defining and executing their use cases to assess the tools. As we moved into implementation then, we involved the users, and they helped us to define and break down the problem, agree what we were going to solve first and how we were going to solve it. And we've always said that our success will be determined by user feedback and the demand to come onto the platform. Part of the challenge we had around business engagement was the acceptance of Agile. Users often want to know exactly how they're going to solve the problem and by when. And we had to take users on a journey to understand that we're not going to try and solve all the problems at once. We're going to work on them incrementally. So next, we set out about empowering the team. We did not want a team where we had to tell them what the problem was and how to solve it. Instead, we wanted to empower the team so that they were responsible for building the platform. And this has enabled us to roll out the platform quicker because we're able to work on multiple things in parallel. And then finally, we did just enough. And what I mean by this is that we did what we needed to do to deliver the use cases, but we stopped there. And this was tough, as it's really easy to allow for scope creep, especially when you've got the users really heavily engaged and they're buying into what you're doing. But doing just enough enabled us to stick to our objectives. So just to summarise, in the last 10 months, we defined a strategy, we've built a team, we've selected vendors, we've implemented Agile, and we've established our cloud environment. And we built a platform, and we are just this very week now releasing it to users. So if we go to the next slide. So what's made Leading Data successful so far in our journey? And I think if we walk through the key points here, so the first point is that we had a clear direction and support at board level. So our project sponsor, who's a chief commercial officer, he has a clear vision for what he wants his trade, how he wants his trading organisation to work. And this vision and passion has really helped the project with its focus and direction. We're also very fortunate to have really good support from our board, with the project being an enabler to deliver our commercial strategy. And this is really key because Leading Data is also about changing the way we work with data, creating a new organisational setup and a new operating model. And if we don't have their support, you can't drive this change through the organisation. Next, it was about failing fast. So we, as a project, are not afraid to fail. And this, I think, comes again from our project sponsor. He accepts that as an organisation, we don't get our trading strategies right all the time, but it's about failing fast and learning from these mistakes. And we're taking this message from him and we're applying it in how we work within the project day to day. Next, we got hands-on with the tool. So this was key to being able to get an early evaluation of the vendors. We were able to see the functionality of the tools, shortlist vendors early on based on their offering. And then next was around leveraging external technology. So from the beginning, when we started the project, one of our key principles was that we wanted to build a platform based on 80% standard functionality. Historically, as a company, we've tended to build everything ourselves, or the majority, but we didn't want to follow this same route. Companies are investing millions of pounds in cloud and data capabilities, and we wanted to leverage this investment and avoid reinventing the wheel. So we accept that some custom code will be needed, but we want this custom code to be used to fill the gaps in the tools and not replace the core functionality. Next, then we created a multidisciplinary team. So we built this team who are responsible for fully supporting the platform. And also we don't have a BA in the middle, a business analyst, with our users. Instead, our data engineers work directly with the users. And this means that we have instant direct feedback between the people developing the platform and who we're building the platform for. And then next of all, something we say so much, but business value is really at the heart of what we do. And this is really fundamental to our approach as a project, because we want to ensure that we are delivering business value. And we use our fortnightly sprint reviews to ask this direct question to ensure that we are continuing to focus on the right areas. Because the size of what we're trying to do, it's so easy to get lost and to start to be delivering, but not to be delivering the right things. Next, we found the right partners. So as I mentioned on the previous slide, we wanted to partner with a company to take us on our journey. And at the start of the project, we acknowledged that we needed external support here to help us with our approach and help build our capabilities. And we didn't want us to find a company where we could just come in and execute tasks. Because if I'm completely honest, at the beginning, we didn't actually know what questions and what tasks they should be doing. So we wanted to find somebody who could help us take us on that journey. And the next part of this then is around the vendor. So we spoke with some vendors where it's very much, this is how we do it. This is how you should do it. That's great, but that's not the right approach for us. We as a company wanted to find somebody who's going to partner with us. So that mindset around how they work is really important, that they understood our vision. But also as well, we also wanted to ensure that the cost model was right for us. We did not want to sign up to long-term license agreements. That's not the right approach for us. What we wanted to do is to have a pay-as-you-go model to give us that flexibility. And finally, as part of this, it's about finding the right technical expertise as well. So hiring in external talent to be able to really support the platform and bring in that necessary capabilities to help us build it. And then finally, we faced into our challenges. So as I mentioned before, when we first started, we weren't a priority to be able to get onto our new cloud infrastructure. Procurement wanted us to follow a traditional waterfall approach, but actually we took on these challenges. And actually this was only possible due to the level of support that we had. So the senior level support really enabled us to be able to take on these challenges. And this through lead and data being a key project where reprioritizations were needed, then it was quite simple to be able to remove those obstacles. And just to summarize, so ultimately what we have done is we've empowered the team and we cleared the challenges, any obstacles out of their way to be able to enable them to be able to focus on delivering the business value. over to Andy.
Take myself off mute. Thanks, Jenny. It's a fascinating, really interesting story, and I think that the team have done a phenomenal job of making the transition and delivering real value rapidly, and also the users being so engaged through the process. I've already seen a couple of the questions pop up in the chat that will no doubt come your way, and Shams as well in a second or two. But it's a really interesting and great story. Just to wrap up before we come on to the questions, then I guess the final slide, it's just about 3 areas, and I think these ones are up on Sham's slides, but it's fundamental to a lot of the concepts and learnings that Jenny's talked about as well. It's about setting direction, being clear on who you are and what your value propositions are. So in the story that Jenny talked about, RWE have got a really clear vision as to what they're trying to achieve with this, with what sorts of data, what the prioritizations are, and what the problems with managing data are. They've aligned and defined their data strategy with the business strategy. And then they've communicated it, and they've got buy-in to it, and they've got buy-in from a very senior level. That's an absolutely key first part. Building the foundations is critical as well, and that's as Sham and Jenny both talked to. Setting yourself up for cloud-driven change. Great example from Sham of lifting and shifting ETRM tools and technology just into the cloud infrastructure, but not actually getting the most out of them. Setting up with your procurement team to make sure you're able to buy software in the right way, rather than putting down a massive license cost initially. How are you going to partner with those organizations to get the most out of it? And is the procurement team of your organization, if you've got one, on board with that approach, and do they buy into that approach? And if not, adapt and get that on board and agreed at the start, so you don't get into the selection process on the wrong foot. And I think that's a really positive and key activity. It's got to be a collaborative activity to get the best of everybody out of those teams. And then finally, deliver incrementally. Don't expect to fail, but be prepared to fail in some of the areas. But look to do so fast. Iteratively deliver value without trying to boil the ocean. This is about identifying where your data is valuable and then incrementally getting value out of that data, but also changing your culture and the way your organization works and treats data as an asset as you go through. There won't be value in all your data, but releasing value out of a few things will really start to change and adapt the culture, and therefore the treatment of data as an asset that needs to be invested in within your organization. And that will set you up for long-term success. So we'll pause there. We're at 12:45. Got about 15 minutes for questions. There's a couple I've seen pop up. Matt, I think you'll.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm gonna host the questions. So thank you to everyone who's posted a question. We're now just going to go through these in turn. I think look, if we don't get round to any questions, we'll endeavour to come back at the end and provide some responses to any questions that we didn't get time to answer. So please don't worry about that. But Andy, the first question actually is from John, and actually is a question perhaps requiring some further explanation of our industry model on slide 10. So it might be worth going back up to slide 10. And John is asking, if I can offer a single portfolio to optimize energy generation, consumption and trading, do I have a fundamentally different business to an aggregator focusing on PPAs? I can see that potentially the more complete the offering, the more difficult it is to franchise.
Great question, John. Good question. I guess, yes, it's going to be harder to franchise as you get a more complicated business. And I guess it's certainly harder to create the handoffs between those teams within a organization that is franchised but needs to interact to gain some of the efficiencies. I guess when we bring up this model, it's less about the structure of the model. It's about how you're going to realize value from data. And I guess part of the data strategy in the question that you asked needs to not just look at the complexity of the organization, but it needs to look at the center of excellence, if you're going to have a center of excellence for data management and the governance, and how you're going to extract value out of that. So I think you're right in your assertion that an organization is going to be harder to franchise a business that's materially more diverse than, let's say, in your question, an example on an aggregator focusing on PPAs only. But I think that's why it's critical to understand through your data strategy how you're going to realize that value as an organization out of data. What data is best shared, what data is best kept within the different teams, and is the value in sharing that data, and then setting up a set of governance and processes and tools that enable you to get realization of that value. So I've gone a little bit off your question there, John, but hopefully answered it to some degree. You can't answer to me directly if you're on mute, so I'll just take that as read, and please post another question in the chat if I haven't quite nailed it.
Thanks, Andy. Another question was, perhaps this one's for Sham. Are we focusing on technology or the type of data strategy to enable a data-driven strategy?
So this is kind of a really kind of important and fundamental question. I think when we talk about data strategy, what does it mean? There's lots of different interpretations of data strategy, and I've seen lots of different executions of data strategy. For me, the critical thing about a data strategy is fundamentally understanding what your business strategy is, where and what direction do you want to take your business, and then kind of linking your data strategy to how your data strategy will enable you to succeed in that business direction that you set yourselves. That link and that kind of alignment is critical, and we see that actually that's really hard to do and not done very well in a lot of organizations. Once you've got that link, then you can start determining the capabilities, both from a technology, a people, a process kind of lens, in terms of how are you going to then fundamentally change the capabilities you've got for data to deliver what you've just kind of defined for your data strategy. That alignment up front, and I guess that's what we spent a lot of time up front with Jenny really doing, is really saying, right, you as an organization, what type of organization do you want to be? What is your appetite for change here, and how do you want to go about that journey? Because that really then drove a strategy and a roadmap to say, okay, if RWest wants to be data at the center, data kind of in the heart of trading decisions, well, actually that means a fundamental change across all those dimensions to deliver that. And our roadmap is split directly across the value delivery, the data to deliver, the fundamental capabilities that underpin that around technology, around operating model, around the people or the team that we want to get in place. Hopefully that answers the question.
Thanks, Sham. I'm going to combine two questions here. Jenny, these are coming your way. So Alex asked, how did you keep your users interested? And what did that look like? And Anna's asking, did you ensure the business focus by continuous testing within the IT team and ensuring that their expectations are aligned with the scope? So I think this is about how did you engage with the users and how did you keep them interested?
Yeah, so I think how do we keep the users interested? I think one of the key things that helped is the fact that it's business led. So I know one of the questions there is around, do we have a product owner from the business as well? And the answer is yes. So we have a lady, Sian, who has, she's an analyst. She's worked with data for 15 years. She's at the heart of the analyst community. And that in itself meant that actually we got that business buy-in because she was able to help bring her colleagues with them to understand what we were doing. And that also helped generate a level of interest too. And we got the users engaged from the early start, so they felt like they were really playing a key role in shaping what we are doing. We also got them when we did the evaluation of the vendors. Actually, it wasn't the project team who evaluated the vendors. We got the users themselves to define their use cases, and they were the ones responsible for evaluating the tools. They were hands-on using the tools day in, day out, and that for us was so key. We had certain tools that we evaluated where at the start they said we think actually it's a bit too complex for what we need at this point in time. We gave them the tool and we actually couldn't get it off them. And that in itself really helped trigger interest. And then from word of mouth, then when people started to understand the benefit and conversations, we started to gain more user interest. In terms of the question around the testing, I'm just trying to find that in the.
Yeah, from Anna.
I can see here. So in terms of the continuous testing, so this is where we are still quite early in our journey at the moment and sort of building out the platform, but continuous testing is something which we're building in within our whole DevOps setup and how we move between the environments. But for me, the continuous testing is key to ensuring the frequent releases that we're going to be enabling through the project.
Yeah, and there's different levels to that testing. So there's a level which is around users. Are we actually delivering the right thing to the users? And that's on an ongoing basis. Our developers, as Jenny said, are working hand in hand with the users to get the requirements on a daily basis. So we're testing with the user on a daily basis. Are we in the right direction? Are we doing the right thing? Then we've got the demos where we're testing actually, are we delivering the right thing? Or is the focus correct? And is the project kind of moving in the right direction? And then we've got all the other testing that you would kind of typically have around security and around kind of then performance and all those, which we are moving to. We're not quite there yet in totality, but we're moving to a complete automated path through DevOps and integration testing across the platform. And that's a real focus for us, so that we can remove all the stuff that is manual that we can automate, and that is giving us speed. And we've already seen significant benefit in putting those kind of capabilities in from day one.
Great. Thank you both. I think we've got time for one or two more, so let's take one from Angus, who asked in the RWE slide. So I think Jenny, this is coming your way. You mentioned a data catalog layer, data access layer, data wrangling layer, all feeding into a data consumption layer. Are you presenting these as different platforms/solutions?
Yeah, so they're all individual solutions that we've selected here. So and for us, it was about looking at best of breed. We wanted to find the best tools in the market for the capabilities that we're implementing. And what we are doing, so they're all individual tools, but as part of our onboarding users to the platform, we're showing how all these tools are integrated and how users should be using them. So what's the best practice? How should they be approaching their use cases, implementing their use cases, using the platform on a daily basis?
And Jenny talked about that 20% custom functionality. Some of that 20% is about how do we make seamless integration between those tools. And that we're spending a lot of time on that. So people don't have to log into multiple tools. They can log into one tool and kind of get access to the data just using their credentials. There's a clear path and use cases in terms of why a user will use tools, and training is a massive part of this in terms of providing a kind of separate tools, but a single capability to the users in terms of how we are delivering the platform.
Great. So a question from Arne. Have you set up an in-house permanent team to govern, support and enhance the setup that you've just presented, Jenny?
Yes, we have. So part of our board remit was to create a new organisational setup, and we started building that team last year. And this will be a multidisciplinary team who are fully responsible for supporting that platform, ensuring that the governance, the support is there, and we're continuing to build that team as well.
Yeah,
small build on. Go on, Sham. Sorry.
Oh no, I was just going to say how important that is. We are changing the mindset of the way the developers work on a day-to-day basis, and having that team focused and dedicated to the delivery of this platform has really kind of helped us to set that strategy, share that kind of vision, and actually deliver. And we've had issues there where in some areas we've got a model where we've got dependencies on our kind of IT cloud providers as well. And that hadn't from day one had that kind of common mind and mindset of actually we're delivering a platform together, and we're changing that. We changed that over time to actually be one team delivering to the same goal and objective. Sorry, Andy. Back to you.
No, it's fine. It's really critical, because I think one of the things in this area is the data strategy articulates how you're going to grow that team, what that team's then going to be responsible for, and what also still remains within the business. So let's say an example is who's responsible for making sure data type A or B is actually accurate and maintained and controlled. That all needs to be understood and articulated, and people need to buy into that as part of that strategy. Otherwise, you end up in a world where the data goes stale, it's not trusted, and you can't leverage it and build on it, which is a core tenet of why getting that strategy right up front and then moving into the implementation with the right level of management support, as Jenny's articulated, was absolutely key.
Jenny, a question from Elisa, asking basically about the kinds of data that you're providing to the users via this platform within the realms of what you can share, of course. You know, perhaps is there anything you can mention about that?
Yeah, so we're very much focused on market data, and our key focus is on the commercial analysts here, and it's very much use case driven. So the first use case, which we've just rolled out, was identified because it helped us to be able to establish the foundations of the platform, but also for it to enable to bring value to the users straight away. So yeah, it's all around focused around the commercial analysts.
And I'll just touch on that other question around confidentiality data there. So security we have built in by design from the start. We've got effectively a lot of kind of licensed data on the platform. So we've basically built permissions and security model from day one into the kind of platform end to end. So it's all kind of integrated with Active Directory and got permissions kind of at the heart of the platform.